So, Alan, just on initial reaction, how do you feel given that this toxicology report, essentially, there's nothing on paper that can indicate that Tequila Raya was intoxicated at the time of the crash? What's your initial thoughts on that?
Well, my initial thought would be that the prosecuting attorney's office, district attorney's office might want to have that blood retested, or they might want to have a more thorough screening of that blood done to see if there's some intoxicant that is simply not being captured on the test that they're using. That may be kind of a long shot, though. I would assume they know what they're looking for. And that'd be my first knee-jerk reaction would be, okay, that testing may be flawed, retest that blood, and or check for a greater screening count than what they tested for previously, just to see if there's something in the system that they simply did not detect or did not test for.
Once is it too late, do you think, or is it still possible for the courts to get this warrant for a blood search and do a larger panel? And would it still be in a system, you think?
Well, initially, I would think that they've already gotten search warrant to test his blood. I don't think they need to get another search warrant to test his blood again. That's a good question. Now, that's a good point. I haven't researched that. And I guess if I were his attorney, I would argue that state needs to get a separate independent search warrant each and every time they want to search the blood. I suspect that the search warrant was worded in such a way that they have authority to search that blood again if they choose to, because the prosecuting attorney's office does that on a regular basis. If the county attorney's office gets a search warrant, searches for alcohol, don't find it, they just resend that blood back to DPS and have them do a drug screening on it.
Um, Now that these initial results are in, the attorney representing Tequila Raya wants his charges reduced to $1 per charge, so about $7 total. Um, what's your reaction to that?
When I think the DA got some flack over that scenario just recently, that was with their failure to have indicted someone within a specific time period required by law, requiring the court requiring the court to release that person on a bond that they could make. Uh, I think a judge would be hard pressed to do just that. I think a judge would be hard pressed to lower his bonds to something as nominal as $1 per count.
Um, because the results are essentially not indicating that he was intoxicated at the time, what other charges could the DA pursue against this man?
Well, the one that comes to mind first and foremost would be, for example, criminally negligent homicide, which has caused the death of an individual by engaging in conduct through criminal negligence. And criminal negligence is the equivalent of when you get in trouble as a kid and you accidentally break something, your parents are giving you a hard time, and you say, "Well, I didn't know that was going to happen." And your parents would tell you as a kid, "Well, maybe you didn't know, but you should have known." That's the equivalent of criminal negligence. Criminal negligence is when you are engaging in conduct that you should have known could have resulted in this result, but you went ahead and engaged in that conduct anyway. Um, and to do so would be such a gross deviation from the standard of care an ordinarily prudent person would have exercised under the same or similar circumstances. For example, if they could, if the state could develop evidence that, for example, this driver fell asleep and he had stayed up for the last 48 hours and he was driving, operating a motor vehicle, when he should have known he needed to sleep. He should have known that he might fall asleep, resulting in an accident. That could be criminal negligence. Although falling asleep is sometimes an involuntary act, which opens up a whole other can of worms.
If you are Tequila Raya's attorney, what would you do in this scenario? Would you place the blame on maybe TxDOT for the construction in the area? Would you perhaps, what do you do in this instance?
There was a famous attorney years and years ago named Percy Foreman out of Houston, long since passed away. One of those famous celebrity level criminal defense attorneys way back in the bygone era. And his philosophy was, don't ever let your client be tried. Don't ever let your client go to trial. Try someone else, anyone else. The jilted lover, the police, the investigation, the construction of the roadway, manufacture of the vehicle. don't let your client stand trial, put somebody else on trial. And what he meant by that, of course, was to deflect attention from your client's behavior to anyone and everyone else who could possibly be blamed. So absolutely, I'm sure his attorney would be looking for just that to see if there's some other rationale, some other reason, some other justification, if there's someone else to blame for this accident other than his client.
On that note, I spoke to his attorney on Friday, and the attorney said that APD was grossly negligent in their arrest affidavit, saying that they persecuted this man and they deemed him guilty before he went on trial with that initial intoxication or sobriety test. Is that surprising to you? What's your reaction to that?
Not particularly understanding that law enforcement, they're making a pretty quick decision in a relatively short period of time without having the benefit of conducting as thorough of an investigation as they would often like. Their initial purpose is to file whatever charge they feel is appropriate and that they can later prove. And it's not uncommon for charges to be filed and subsequent investigation reveal that those charges might not be appropriate.
One of my last questions for you is we know that this attorney that's representing Waldekiller is trying to get the bond reduced to $7 total.
Who is that attorney? I'm not even
Um,
sure.
Bristol Myers, Bristol
Okay,
C. Myers.
I know
Um,
where.
yes, yes. So he's representing Waldekiller. He wants to get his bond reduced to $7. Um, but now that the toxicology results are in, what do you think? What are the next steps? What happens now?
I think Bristol would re-urge that motion, and of course, he would go into court and hold his hands up like he's getting robbed at gunpoint and say, "Judge, they don't even have any evidence my client's done anything wrong. This is just a bad, terrible, tragic accident, horrific though it may be. State has no evidence and is not in possession of any evidence that would suggest any wrongdoing on my client's part." And he might have a very good point in arguing that at this point.
Yeah. Is there any, to your knowledge, the defendant could he have been intoxicated and the panel not have picked up on that? And, there's so many substances.
And that's exactly what I was suggesting. I'm not sure the number or the screen count of the drug testing that was done. Typically, there's like a 10 count screening done. But absolutely, there could be something in his system that simply was not tested for, or simply was not detected. And I would suspect law enforcement might want to retest that blood just to make sure they're not missing something.
What is the likelihood, do you think, that these charges are dropped?
That's a big speculation. That's a big speculation. There are a lot of variables in that equation. I would hazard to guess what those odds are.
Understood. Is there anything else, Alan, that maybe I haven't asked you, but you think is important to note?
I always use that question myself in voir dire when I'm talking with jury panel. Says, is there anything that you all think that I might want to know that I haven't asked you about that you think is important? And sure enough, someone wants to raise their hand. Well, yeah, you haven't asked, but I know so and so or such or someone. I really can't think of anything, to be honest. I like say I did not know till you shot me that email that his drug count had come back negative. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out from this point forward.
I think so too. I know that Bristol's trying to get the charges dropped, bond reduced, everything that he can, because I think this was shocking for all of us. I don't think any of us really expected, nothing on paper.
And it would also be interesting to see what if, and I've seen this before, where the officer say, "Oh yeah, I could detect a strong odor of alcoholic beverage on someone's breath as I spoke to them, their eyes are red and bloodshot and glassy, and just all the standard indicators of intoxication by reason of the introduction of alcohol in the system." And then sure enough, oh, there is no alcohol in the system. And of course, it kind of begs the question how the officer claims to have smelled alcohol on someone's breath when there is no alcohol. Um, but once again, that's not uncommon, not common, but not completely unheard of.
That's essentially what we're looking at here on the arrest affidavit. So it was interesting to say the least. But
Well,
um,
what did it say? Were there indicators of intoxication or clues?
yes, I can forward you the documents. In the arrest affidavit, there was indications of intoxication. Basically, on the field sobriety test, he failed it. Glossy eyes. I think the pen test, the eyes weren't falling over. But uh, the toxicology results came out 100% clear.
Well, and I've seen a couple of times where officers will testify. They put so much weight in that horizontal gaze nystagmus test, for example, just nystagmus, that involuntary jerking of the eyes as you try to follow a stimulus. And officers will testify with 100% confidence. The only thing that will cause nystagmus is the result of a central nervous system depressant being introduced in the system, such as alcohol. That's the only thing that causes it, absent some severe blunt force trauma to the head. That's the only thing that caused it. So now we're 100% behind that horizontal gaze nystagmus test. Oh, well, it turns out this person doesn't have any alcohol in their system. And that I've seen that happen where officers are just so certain of the positive result of that horizontal gaze nystagmus test and nothing causing it except for alcohol in the system. And then lo and behold, the person does not have alcohol in the system.
Yeah, and that's what happened here, but it'll be interesting to see, what comes next.
Thank you for watching. Please hit the subscribe button and get the latest news by downloading the CBS Austin News app.